Welcome to our latest guest to the podcast, Trenna Probert, founder and CEO of Super Fierce and Fierce Impact. And to start off, just tell us a little bit more about yourself. And I'm especially curious to hear more about your path to becoming an entrepreneur. How did you start? What brought you to this point in your career and life journey? Tell us more.
Yeah, it's really a timely question for me because I'll be turning 50 this year, which comes as a great surprise to me.
Congratulations.
To find myself at this point. But it's a time where you do, thank you. And it's a time where you do really start to reflect quite a lot on where you've been, how you end up at this point, and also where you're going. And on the inside, I still feel 8. So it's quite surprising to find myself that I'm actually 50. But it means that I've had a long time to get to this point in my life. And I was reflecting on it recently, and there is a common thread, which is that from the time I was about 5, I always walked a different path. Mm-hmm. So, and that, that was a little bit uncomfortable. I was a pretty odd but bright kid. And I think my entrepreneurial journey really started when I was living in Vancouver, and I used to pinch produce from my neighbours' backyards and then walk around selling it back to them. But maybe that would have been a career as a criminal. But, I've always worked in and around creative, innovative pursuits, even when I've worked in large organisations. And I was very lucky in my 20s that I had someone headhunt me and bring me into a very unusual situation at American Express, working in Sydney in Australia. But they identified that I was just great at coming up with innovative solutions to crazy problems. And so he really entrusted me with the ability to do that. And instead of trying to give me jobs to do, he would present me with problems to solve. And so at the age of 24, I started off on that journey, and I was just given the freedom. I was so fortunate. I was given the freedom to let my mind range free and build products or businesses or ideas or networks and events that would solve a problem. And that really set me off on that journey. And at the age of 29, I managed to talk myself into a redundancy from American Express because I wanted to set up my first business before I turned 30. And so I scraped in just in the nick of time, but I was able to
say that's a big risk, especially at that age, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting. And again, going back to taking a different approach to things, it didn't occur to me that that was a risk. It didn't feel like a risk. It felt like the smartest thing in the world to do. And, I really wanted to be able to do this. But when I investigate the feeling further, the reality is that I was ready to move on from that particular corporation. I'd had a lot of freedom to do amazing creative things, and I didn't have to fit into somebody else's mold. So I actually think it was really fear that drove me to make a decision that to other people would seem risky, which was I couldn't imagine applying for an existing job and getting it. I just couldn't imagine that happening. And so my solution to that was, okay, well, I'll just create a job for myself in my own business. And that was the beginning of that journey. So if you think that that was at the age of just before 30, I've been on an entrepreneurial journey now for 20 years. And a part of that was feeling like I couldn't fit into somebody else's organisation, but I've also always just had this burning desire to build and create things, and I move at a fast pace, and I like to drive crazy outcomes as quickly as possible. And so I think it's just a natural thing for me to, I kind of think about you sort of on the edge of the precipice of brilliance, something amazing could happen on the other edge. Oh, you could topple down, it's going to be awful, it's going to be a horrible failure. But I just keep striving and believing that, I'm going to scale that summit and end up somewhere wonderful.
Right. It's very inspirational. Thank you for sharing that. My next question, Trenna, I wanted to hear a little bit more about what the inspiration was behind starting your company, Super Fierce, and also for our listeners, really interested to hear about, how it actually works.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, I'm very passionate talking about Super Fierce. So, Super Fierce is the combination of lots of pieces that came together. I've worked in and around financial services for close to 30 years. And, you know, my last proper job, I was the head of strategy for Asia Pacific for Macquarie Private Bank, you know, building and scaling products into different markets, 14 different jurisdictions, etc. So, you know, got deep expertise, but on the other side of that as well is a very personal story. So I understand the power of finance when it's used for good. And Super Fierce is my solution to trying to close the $30 trillion global gender wealth gap. It's a fairly lofty goal, but I think that we can have a very, very big impact on that. So, but it's really my personal story that's the part of this. So I've already alluded to the fact that, you know, I'd had quite a high flying career as a young person, and in my personal life, you know, was traveling around the world first class and living what looked like an amazing life. But at the age of 34, I had to borrow $3,000 from my parents to leave an unhealthy relationship with an 18-month-old under my arm. And by all intents and purposes from the outside, I looked like the person that shouldn't happen to. So the real reason behind Super Fierce is I want to empower women with the self-confidence and the ability, support and tools to be able to become financially resilient and confident so that they can live a life of their choosing. And that's a kernel of the personal side. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, in another old business of mine, Revolver Capital, we had actually built a superannuation fund for a client of ours. And for your international listeners, superannuation is the Australian pension product that we use here, and we have a highly evolved system here in Australia where the government decided that, you know, we're not very good at thinking ahead to the future, present bias, and so they've mandated that that employers pay 10% of your salary into a fund that then there's invested and grows to fund your retirement. So we had built a low-cost super fund for a customer of ours, and we were the fund manager for that. But through that process, we could see that they really didn't understand, our customer didn't understand how to explain the benefits of the fund to their clients. So we set about building a calculator, which became an algorithm, which we thought about giving them, but then ultimately decided was really powerful and built a business around it. And so what Super Fierce does is, at its heart, it has this algorithm that interrogates some handcrafted databases that we've built about every single fee in every single fund in every investment category in the country. What happens is somebody comes into our platform, they enter in some information. The platform runs a minimum of 182,000 calculations at that point to generate a free digital statement of advice. So a statement of advice here is, you know, if you're licensed to provide advice, as we are, you have to provide this legal document. Typically, they're really hard to read, and a financial advisor will charge between $3,000 and $4,500 for that report here in Australia, and that's before implementing the advice. So by digitizing that and by building out this robust series of data and the algorithm that interrogates that, we're actually able to deliver that report free, arming Australians with this really important information. So they see how much they've got in super today. They also see how much they're on track to retire with, and the gap between what they're on track to retire with what they need to retire to what the government deems as a comfortable lifestyle. We do not think that's a comfortable lifestyle, just to be clear, but that's what the number is that they think. And we then show them how much they can save in fees if they were to switch into a lower cost, consistently performing fund in a range of different investment categories. And the average savings for an Australian woman is over $100,000. For a man, it's closer to $150,000 over their lifetime. And so that's what the first product does, is it makes it really easy to put your money, it's your money, but put your money back into your fund so it's working harder for you so that you can retire into safety. And so that's where we've started. But what we're actually building out is a full scalable advice platform, or in normal people language, a digital personal wealth platform with advice baked into the heart of that. So not robo advice, which is typically around, you know, massaging the edges of efficiency and so on. It's truly about delivering scalable advice to empower people to make great decisions about their financial future.
Wonderful. And would you say your personal experience that, you know, you were so kind to share sort of maybe paved the path for coming up with something like this, where, empowering people to make educated financial decisions and, watching their retirement savings grow and, being secure in their financial life? Like, what sort of impact did your personal experience have on it?
It's everything. It's absolutely everything. Because people look at somebody like me, I'm tall, I'm confident, I'm articulate, I've got a lot of experience, but it still happens to women all the time, where we give away our power in situations as mothers and carers. And it doesn't have to be like that. And often people feel like they're alone, or it's shameful, or they don't know how to ask questions. And, and no offense to all my beautiful male colleagues in traditional financial services, but typically it's not designed for women. Women's earning trajectory over their lifetime is very lumpy and bumpy, and it's infinitely unique. There are so many different permutations. Whereas for men, largely, particularly, white men, their earning trajectory is in one direction, and it's largely homogenous. And so what happens is that financial systems and products are not necessarily geared to accommodate the very different lifestyle journey that each woman can have. And pinkwashing doesn't cut it. And so for me, I draw on my personal experience of lived financial hardship to really wrap my arms around that experience, but also my expertise and capability to find solutions that make it easier for women and the people that they love. 22% of our customers at the moment are men. So we focus on women first, but we're for everybody. But to make it possible for them to feel heard, to use language they understand, to really understand why they don't make these decisions and what's the type of support that they need. And our aspiration is to make appropriate, affordable advice accessible to every woman in Australia before we jump offshore and come closer to you over there. So it is a personal story, and we're a social enterprise. And a lot of people nowadays talk about ESG and impact and so on, but often it's a bit of a cherry on top of your Sunday situation. When I started to build Super Fierce, I was absolutely determined that we would be able to be self-sustaining. So we needed to be commercial. But the impact side of what we were doing was so important to me. So I spent quite a lot of time building a model that I thought would enable us to do everything. So typical entrepreneur, I want to solve all the problems with one hit
all at the same time,
if possible. All at the same time, and my team laughs at me a bit, but I have a tendency, I always talk about, let's see if we can take this apple and turn it into fruit salad. And often that's where the magic comes from, and sometimes it's a blinking mess. So, it can fall either side. But, what we've done with our model is that there are two parts to it, which you mentioned earlier. So there's Super Fierce, which is profit for purpose, and then Fierce Impact is what we call our philanthropic soul sister. So the way that the model works is that when we drive an economic benefit for our customers through Super Fierce, it triggers a number of actions inside the economic engine room that is Super Fierce. It triggers a donation across to Fierce Impact. So every time somebody pays for our service, we donate $100 to Fierce Impact, and the team in Fierce Impact, their job is to find and fund and amplify the impact of initiatives helping marginalised women. So at the moment, we're funding and supporting strategically a program, an 8-week program that takes women out of risk and vulnerability, trains them up, places them into employment, and then provides curated care and coaching for 2 years. In this way, but of course, the more commercially successful we are on the Super Fierce side, we are driving shareholder value. So we earn the right to keep going. We're pumping the engine room that's sending the money across into Fierce Impact. And in that way, our impact outcomes are directly correlated to the commercial success of our venture. And, that was kind of my answer to, I've always worked in and around sort of NFP, even when I've been in corporates or out on my own. And I love that there are good people doing good works, but I get frustrated by the inefficiency of good people walking around with their hand out all the time trying to get more cash. So I wanted to remove that for us. So I wanted to build a model where the more commercially successful we were, the more our team would be able to address the issues that we care about. And so the way we talk about that is we say that we're fiercely commercial, but unapologetically purposeful. So purpose is at the heart of everything that we do, but we know that when we can deliver great commercial outcomes to our customers and to our shareholders, then we win the right to unapologetically drive the outcomes from a social impact perspective that matter to us.
What a great message. So what's next for Super Fierce?
Well, it's very timely that you say that. You know, I'm a bit bleary-eyed here because we're working around the clock at the moment. I mean, I don't sleep much anyway, but we're working around the clock at the moment because we're very excited. You know, we're accelerating towards the launch of our subscription platform. So at the moment, we charge a one-time fee for the super solution, so focusing on the retirement income phase. We are busily building out the other aspects of the platform that will enable us to move towards a subscription model, ideally launching in the first week of December. Fingers crossed, don't hold me to it, hoping, trying, working very hard towards that. But so we're very excited about that because we believe, like everybody else, that financial education is very important, but we don't think that alone it's enough. Often you need more support and tools and even advice. A lot of people are frightened of advice, but we think it's tremendously important. When I say people, I mean in the industry, sometimes there's, you know, particularly in Australia where, you know, there's been some icky moments over the last decade or so where some changes from a regulatory perspective, but we think it's very important. So we're actually building out a scalable advice platform that brings together in one place a place where women can plan their fierce life. You know, where do they want to go? Who are they going to be? How are they going to experience? What's the impact they're going to make? And then what are the things they need to do to be able to achieve that? And so that's where the, you know, the financial advice side is really tucked in under the bonnet. So unlike traditional financial services, where we tend to think about the what and the how a lot, we're starting with the why. You know, where do you want to go? How do you want to feel? What does that look like? And what do you need to do to get there? And obviously there are all of those life stages within financial advice that support under the bonnet. But yeah, we're pretty excited about that. And then a little bit closer to where we are today, at the end of July, we'll be launching our first ever really public campaign around what we're doing. And so that's about showing, really confronting present bias and trying to get people to understand that who they are today, tomorrow, the day beyond, it's all the same up until when you retire. And that's very challenging to do that. So we've got a pretty exciting campaign coming, which internally we call the Grantster campaign. But we're really trying to get people to imagine, what does a gangster granny lifestyle look like for you? So I'll make sure that you're one of the first people to see it when it comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to it. And it sounds like you're going to be very, very busy over for the rest of the year.
Yeah, probably the rest of my life, actually, but that's the way I like it.
Good. Trenna, for this part of the conversation, I want to pivot a little bit and focus more on entrepreneurship as a whole. And as someone who's been doing this for the last 2 decades plus, I wanted to ask you, what are some things about starting a business that no one tells you about? And are there any specific challenges that you saw as a female entrepreneur?
Yeah, absolutely, to all of those things. So, I'm a mother of 4 kids across 3 families, so it's a blended family. And so, yes, I'm a business founder and I'm a business leader, and, I'm a mentor and a coach, and I'm a friend and I'm a daughter and I'm a mother and I'm a stepmother and I'm a wife. And, there's complexity with that I think people don't talk about. And it's because it can feel a little bit dangerous sometimes, because we don't want to be rude to our male counterparts and say that it's a bit tougher. But often it is, right? We don't have a wife at home waiting to help us with anything. I'm probably going to get crucified for saying this, so apologies, everybody. But I have a recommendation. There's an Australian book you should all read by the incredible author and political commentator here in Australia, Annabel Crabb, and it's called The Wife Drought. And I couldn't recommend it more highly. But it really does touch on an important point, which is there's not a lot of additional reprieve and support. And in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, you know, where you can get around and make the connections, have exposure to investors and advice and support, is often when it's difficult as a mother to do that. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the breakfast, so when you need to be dropping your kids at school, you know, evening events can be harder to attend and so on. Now, I'm more fortunate than many people. I have great support around me, but I was a single mother for a long time and it was tough. So I think that, you know, there are additional challenges. There are also significantly harder obstacles to overcome in securing funding for our initiatives. And that's particularly true if it's a female-founded business focused on women or focused on a problem that only women understand. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that that people who aren't women or don't identify as women or anything in between don't care and don't understand, but we have a natural bias as humans to hire the people like us, or to spend time with people who are more like us, or to invest in people who are more like us, or to invest into things that we understand. You know, investing is intuitive, right? So you tend to invest into something where you can understand that a problem that matters is being solved, or that there's a product that you would actually buy. So it's not, you know, it's not because men suck, right? It's just, right. It's challenging, right? Absolutely. We love men. And so I think that there are additional challenges with that. We don't have access to those same conversations a lot of the time. So I actually bootstrapped my business until the end of last year when we raised our seed round. And as I went out into that process, everybody's like, oh, Trenna, don't be silly. You know, you'll raise that money like that. It'll be really easy. And what are you talking about? You know this stuff. You've been on both sides of the ledger. You know, I built an angel investing club, you know, all of that stuff. And I said, no, you don't understand. And I do understand. And it's why, you know, I closed that round aggressively. I closed it in 2 months. We were oversubscribed by $500,000 for a $1.5 million round. And, you know, we had a 67% conversion rate from meeting to a check. But it was like that because I spent 4 months preparing like crazy to increase the chances of success. And I also put in place a filtering mechanism to ensure that I was being efficient with my time and talking to the people who were going to be the best investors for me and the most likely to want to come on the journey with me. And so I have a framework that I use in my business for hiring people. And I also use it for choosing the projects that we'll work on. And I also used it gently in the background around who I would and would not want as an investor in my business. Mm-hmm. And that's a piece of advice that I do have for people who are setting off on this journey, which is all money is not created equal. And when you're raising money, you can feel like, you know, you're not in the power seat and you need the cash and, you know, there's self-doubt and questioning and all of these things, right? But the reality is that an investor in your business becomes a part of your business. They become a part of, they're a business partner. And you know, you hope that you're going to be on this journey together for the long term.
Right. And will they should also share your values and, you know, what you stand for as well, right?
That's exactly right. And so the values piece is critical. So the little framework I use is called the good, willing, and able. And the good is about values. You know, what do they believe in? How do they move through the world? You know, how do they behave? Are they going to help us and lift us up and push us forward? Are they going to keep our feet grounded when we need it? You know, there's that. And then the willing is about attitude. How are they going to come to the party? So with employees, it's like, how do you turn up to work? Are you a self-starter? You know, do you support others to succeed? And when I go through this process, if I can't get past the good, we don't go any further. If we can get past the willing, like, woohoo, we're heading in the right direction. But then we get to the able. And the able in a corporation is about skills and experience and expertise and connections and those sorts of things. In a startup environment, whether it's with your investors or with its, people who you bring into the business or who you're going to partner with, the able for me is about aptitude, which also links to the willing. So it's the attitude and aptitude. Are you willing to try to learn? Are you willing to lean in if you don't know? Are you willing to get uncomfortable with us? Or do you have the ability to leave us alone and let us get on with it and trust us to know what we're doing? And there's no one right answer, but, I try to use that so that I don't make as many of the mistakes as I've made in the past.
Well, and I also think once you have a successful business, no one sort of thinks about all the hard work and the thought process and all of the things you've had to do to get up to that point. So really appreciate the transparency and, sharing everything you had to do to get Super Fierce up and running and successful. You also did mention.
Yeah, well, and the pathway to successful, right? So what is successful? And you were talking about the entrepreneur's journey. I got up very early. I get up early every morning, but I went down to the beach and it was pretty freezing actually for us. We don't live in Toronto, and but I was down there really early because I just woke up, and I think most founders I speak to wake up like this most days with this I guess this juxtaposition of, on one side, this deep-seated fear that you can't and you won't, and it's too hard and you don't have what it takes. And then this other side, you don't become a founder if you don't have a burning energy and a belief that you can and you will and you must, right?
Yeah, and just so keep pushing forward.
Right. And so for me, I'm always looking for the little things that I can do to help get myself into the right frame of mind, or to give myself the time to feel vulnerable and human. And so what I do is I surround myself with great people. I use the outdoors. I keep messages when I've done something great to remind myself that actually you kind of can do this, but it is hard. And I feel that that's something that needs to be spoken about more. We need to spend more time looking at what we can do to dispel some of the myths around this and provide greater access to good, strong, proactive mental health support for founders and their teams, because what we're doing matters, it's important, and it's impossibly difficult. So if there's anybody in your listeners and in your network who's keen to solve that problem, I think there's something really special there that can be done.
Well, I'll keep my keep my eyes and ears open. So if I do hear of anyone or find anyone, I'll be in touch. So you also mentioned, surrounding yourself with the right people. Earlier in the conversation, you spoke about a mentor, at your position at American Express. How important has mentorship been in this journey as an entrepreneur, and as well on the other side as a founder, as a leader? How important is it for you to mentor people?
Yeah, look, I think the answer to all of those is absolutely critical. And I'm going to start backwards and go to the front. So just because you finished with the people. So, I mentioned the good, willing, and able and the aptitude thing. And so I think part of the secret sauce to our success where we are at the moment is the willingness to lean into the energy of finding great people who may not necessarily already know how great they are, or to not assuming because someone's young that they don't have the capability and skills, or because they're old that they've run out of time, or they're going to go have a baby, or any of these things. So, for me, what I like to do is, and it can be uncomfortable for people sometimes because I don't wrap a really tight structure around what somebody's job is. I focus more on accountabilities. So what do we need you to help us to experience or create? And so we use a framework there called Freedom Within Boundaries. And I actually stole that from Macquarie Bank. So that was one of the brand values there, but I love it, right? So we need people to have enough freedom to explore and try and innovate. We're disruptors, we're innovators. So you can't put a stranglehold, but we work in a highly regulated financial services industry. And in Australia, you know, that's a big deal here, like a really big deal in the wealth and advice space. And I'm the director, so I go to jail if they stuff it up. So, you know, we need to have some structure, but getting that balance right is really important. And so what I try to do is to be very, you know, I say arms, heart, and mind wide open, right? Because I want my team to see that. I want them to know that they can try. I want them to know that, yeah, you can fail. It's what you do in that moment that matters. How do you go from fail to fierce? You feel the failure for a moment, then you get up, you look at it, wonder what you could learn from it or what you can do better next time. You get the people around you to help you, and then you move forward. And that's how you go from fail to fierce. And we try to do that every day in our business in a small way. But the dark side of that is, you know, that's exhausting as well, being that for everybody. And, you know, as a mother as well, that's my job for my kids as well. And as a woman, you know, nearly 50, I've also got elderly parents. My dad will be 80 this year, so I play that role there as well. So it would be irresponsible of me as a mother and as a leader in my business if I wasn't doing the work to try and look after my mental and physical well-being also. And that can be hard. And, you know, sometimes you get annoyed when everyone says, oh, you know, you've got to look after yourself and you can't pour from the cup if you don't fill it up or whatever it is, right? And so that can be annoying sometimes, but it's true. So what I try to do is, and I mean, that's probably one of the benefits of being older, is I now have given myself permission to believe that I matter enough, that I'm valuable enough, that I value myself enough to ask for help, to let people coach me or support me. And that's my advice to young people, but young women in particular, is you are worthy of mentoring. You are worthy of coaching. I actually have 3 coaches for different things. And, you know, and they're on speed dial if I need them. And I've now got a good understanding of who I need at what times. But I also am very pretty brutal actually about making sure I've got the right people around me who aren't going to say yes to me, but they believe in me and want to help me to be the very best that I can be. And that matters to me because I'm here to change the world. Like, I want to live a big, amazing, wonderful life. I choose joy, but I'm also a risk taker. And that's that precipice of brilliance, right? You know, there's a strong chance I'm going to topple down the bad side of that baby, but I really want to do something that's going to make life better for other people. And so that's what pushes me to get out of bed at 3 a.m. And to do that, I need to have people helping me to be the best that I can be.
And Trenna, I'm so glad you brought it up, because I think as women, you know, we're, like you said so many times throughout this conversation, we're juggling so many different roles, you know, outside of our jobs, just being caretakers, whether it's with, you know, like you said, parents, family, siblings, kids. And I think we're often made to believe that we can't say that we need help or that we're struggling, and we just have to sort of power through and you know, continue doing all of it. So this is such an important message that you just mentioned, that, you know, it's okay, that you're worthy, it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to be coached, and it's okay to give help.
Yeah, and you know, and there are so many other little things that we need to be doing for ourselves and for each other. You know, I'm probably a little bit unpopular with my 2 male business partners, but I'm just like, I need you guys to step up, right? You need to organize lunch sometimes. If it's somebody's birthday coming up, you go get the card. Because if we just leave that to the women in the business all the time, we're reinforcing those stereotypes and those messages. And it seems like such a small thing, but it's actually huge. All of these little things that build up together. Absolutely. You know, and, you know, as a female founder, something I do struggle with, and I'm a pretty warm, happy person, but I'm complex like any human. I have needs like any human. I'm not just one shade. And so as a female founder, I think there is often an expectation that you will be a nurturer and a carer in the business. And I do care, but at the end of the day, I'm here to build a highly successful, scalable business. I'm trying to solve a global problem, and I can't do that by singing Kumbaya. Sometimes I've got to push hard. Sometimes I can't take your advice to have a holiday or, go home tonight. Like sometimes I've just got to keep going. And so that can be really challenging. I see that there is there's not an alignment around expectations of behavior in these situations. That doesn't mean I get to be, a horrible person or those sorts of things. But it does mean that sometimes if I'm not hugging you and pouring you a cup of tea, it doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It just means I'm doing my job. Exactly. Just get out of my way, right? I've got stuff to do here.
You're running a business.
But it's a very unpopular thing to say, right?
What do you love about being your own boss?
So what do I love about being my own boss? That's almost impossible for me to answer because I actually have never felt any different. And it's really interesting because I was a complete pain in the ass to be a boss of, I'm sure. I wasn't very good at fitting into organizations. I'm not great at following the rules, mostly because I didn't see them. And I sing and hug a lot and I work really hard and, all of those things. So I didn't really fit in. So, but fortunately for me, I was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 38. So at that point, I'd been living my life in a particular way and, I didn't realize I was supposed to fit in. And so, it was probably pretty, it was uncomfortable for me, but it was definitely more uncomfortable for everybody else. So I think by the time I was diagnosed, I take meds now, but it was too late for me at that point. So I've always operated the same way, to be perfectly honest. But I think what's best about being my own boss is that at the age of nearly 50, I've come to terms with the fact that it's my difference, it's my energy, it's the things that maybe feel a bit like the rub of a blister on the back of a shoe for other people that actually put me in a position to be the creator and founder and builder that I am. So being my own boss means that I can be myself. And that doesn't mean not trying to be the best version of myself, but it means being able to create an environment that enables me to bring my best. And it's actually something I'm really passionate about, why we need more female founders, why we need more women building businesses. So instead of focusing on the conversation about the right man for the job, for board level positions and those sorts of things, instead of criticizing that situation, which we can in situations, but if the right person for the job is someone who looks like you in the business that you build, we need to have more women building businesses where the right person for the job starts to look more like that founder, and where we're creating cultures and organizations that empower and enable different types of work lifestyles, that different types of characteristics and behaviors. And I'm excited. This is not just a woman conversation. This is a now conversation where younger people are demanding this of life, of themselves, of their families, of their businesses, and they want to do things differently. They want to make the world better for themselves than everybody else. And so that's where I see a real opportunity as well, by having more diversity with the people who are building businesses. And it's why we need to support them to succeed more.
Wonderful. I do have one last question for you, and I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. It's been inspiring, energizing, and you've brought up, addressed so many important issues and brought up so many good points that I think all our listeners have a lot to think about. But before we sort of close off for this session, I did want to ask you, you've done so much and, sounds like you've still got a lot more to go. Looking back, what would you tell your younger self?
I would tell my younger self, it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to be different. It's okay not to feel like you're not getting it right all the time. and then to keep going despite that. Because ultimately, if you can truly suspend disbelief, if you can ignore the noise of what everybody tells you that you should do, should be, should go, the shoulds, and just create enough quiet and space around yourself to imagine and create your own path, that's the right path. You know, I've done so many stupid things. I've made so many mistakes. You know, I've experienced lots of pain and disappointment and rejection and frustration. I feel like I went down so many wrong paths. But I so believe that every single one of those moments, all of those things, I honestly wouldn't change any of them. And a lot of them really suck. But I wouldn't change any of them because I believe that they've ultimately brought me to the point where I'm supposed to be, making me uniquely the person that I am today, ready to solve a problem that I care about and to do it in a way that is authentic and honest and makes sense and brings me joy as well. And so if I could have spent less time in an internal dialogue criticizing myself and, you know, being unkind to myself, I would be very happy with that. And so it's a timely reminder to Trenna today that that's important because, you know, we all have that internal dialogue. So trying to embrace, be kinder to ourselves. And that's why the previous conversation about surrounding yourself with good people is so important. The people who will call you up and just say, hey, I just wanted to remind you, I think you're awesome. And one last reflection on that for you is that when I was walking on the beach this morning, I was having a chat to myself. I tend to do that a bit. And I was just kind of like, too much, not enough, or just right. And, you know, I feel like I've spent my entire life with people telling me that I'm too much or I'm a lot. Whereas on the inside, I've always been feeling like I wasn't enough or I wasn't right. And now I'm getting comfortable at the age of 50 with the idea that perhaps I'm exactly the right amount, that I'm just right for where I need to be and what I want to do. And if I'm too much for some people, then that's actually okay because it's not about them. It's about me and it's about where I'm going and what I'm going to do. And so I'm getting comfortable with the idea that I'm not too much and I'm not just enough. I'm perfectly right for where I need to be today. And I'd love that for every person.
And I'm sure our listeners would love that too. I personally do, and am definitely taking that away amongst other things from this conversation. Trenna, that's all that, unfortunately, I know we could probably keep talking for, you know, another hour or more hours, but unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for the session today. I hope you'll come back soon sometime and talk to us about all the newer things that you'll be doing then. But, you know, it's so...
Well, I would love to. And you need to pop down to visit us in Australia soon.
Oh, I would love that as well.
We can change seasons, right? So, you know, we'll come over for your summer and you can come for ours.
Anytime between the months of December to March, I'd be okay to go down and spend that time in Australia and, you know,
then come on over. We would love to have you.
Wonderful.
Look, thank you so much. I'm excited about the podcast and what you stand for and this wonderful community of people. So thank you so much for the invitation to be a part of it.
You're very welcome.